Hi there, this is Thomas Aaron from Fetch Masters Dog Training and host of the Positive Gun Dog Training Pro community. Today, joining me is my Colorado dog training colleague, Amy Hughes-Creaven. She is the creator of a positive snake avoidance protocol, and today she's going to tell us all about it. Let's get started. So welcome, Amy. It is good to see you. How are things going on your end?
Things are going great up here. I'm excited to be here.
Good. We're excited to have you. We have a group of about 80 people in our Positive Gun Dog Training Pro online community, and then we have a lot of Facebook fans and stuff like that, and I'm super excited to get this video out to them. To get us started, can you tell our audience a little bit about you and your journey into dog training?
Sure. So let's see, way back when, in 2010, had a dog that really got me interested in dog training, and I think we all have that dog.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
And so I got really into it, decided that I wanted to take it a little bit further. I went to Karen Pryor Academy and became a certified training partner. And there I got to meet Lindsay Wood and Shelly Brower. And they were at the Boulder Valley Humane Society. And at that time they were looking to hire somebody else. So I got to go and work there for, I think, 3 to 4 years until I decided to go out on my own. And I've been doing my own thing ever since.
Yeah, you're really, I think you're really popular down here in the Denver area for mentoring Karen Pryor trainers, aren't you?
Yeah. So I've helped a lot with the Karen Pryor Academy. So when Shelly and Lindsay come out to teach those classes, sometimes I get to go down and help and assist in those workshops that they have at Boulder Valley.
Awesome. Okay. So what got you into snake avoidance training?
That's a good question. So 3 years ago, I got an email from Sherry Woodard down at Best Friends Animal Sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
And she was looking for somebody to co-host one of these workshops with her. And I said yes. And we went down and co-presented down in Durango. And the rest has been history. It's just like there's so much interest in it because nobody else seems to be doing it. So I've just kind of taken it and ridden the wave.
Yeah, I've told you about this, I think, in a previous communication, but I used to do snake avoidance training in the traditional way. I have seen people do it online, and it's god-awful harsh, and I never was that harsh with it, but I actually quit doing it. Number one, I don't like it. But number two, I was kind of fortunate in that bird hunting here in Colorado happens in very, very cold times of year. And so there's not a lot of use for it during those times of year. But I also get a lot of pet dog owners who do a lot of hiking and that sort of stuff. And they're always, are often looking for snake avoidance training. So I'm glad that you have started this, and I've started referring people to you. Can you give us, without going into a lot of detail, hopefully we could dig into more detail later, but from sort of a 50,000 foot view, can you sort of compare and contrast your methodology with the methodology of traditional snake avoidance trainers?
Yeah, so from the videos I've seen and from the stories I've heard since doing this, and then in my background, I did a little bit of search and rescue training too. So a lot of those dogs went through the snake avoidance training as well. So a lot of the snake avoidance dogs that have been through it come to me, and they are seeing some side effects that they didn't necessarily want to see. Either they're now fearful of men, or umbrellas that just happened to be in the training area when they were being shocked hopefully in association with the rattlesnakes, but we don't get to control what the dogs are associating that shock with. So it's kind of an unfortunate side effect. I've also seen dogs show up actually in my snake avoidance class that have been through the shock collar training. And we present them with this dummy snake, and they are dragging their owner to every corner of the room just trying to escape. And I can't imagine what would happen if that dog were off leash, and they were trying to recall them away from a road, or, some other danger that might be out there. So there's some side effects to it that we don't necessarily want to see. That said, when we're talking about using positive reinforcement, we're looking at what do we want the dogs to do rather than what do we want them not to do. So when we're looking at what we want the dogs to do, we want it to be, away from the snakes, or behavior away from the snakes. And it might be nice if it were helpful for us. So for instance, if a dog were to find a snake, we don't want them to go and investigate, but it might be nice if they came and told us about it so that we knew where it was, because now we have a dog that's close to us telling us that there's a snake nearby, and we can put them on leash, or keep our eyes open for the snake, so that we're aware of what's going on in the environment.
It's interesting. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's interesting that you mention unwanted side effects. So I snake proofed my dog about 10 years ago. And to this day, if I take her out hunting, and she hits one of, like out here in the fields in Colorado, we have these little bramble bushes, or goat head bushes, and the dog will hit it, and they'll make this little sound like that.
Yeah.
The dog is out of there, out of control, getting as far away from that sound as it can. So yeah, I hear what you're saying on that. So is what you're doing a clicker based approach?
It can be. It depends on the dog and their training history. In the workshops, honestly, I'm trying to educate the handlers and give them experience in training these behaviors. It's not something that, unfortunately for me and for everybody else, that they can show up to the workshop and when they leave, they've got a dog that's going to 100% avoid rattlesnakes. And that's, I think, one of our big downfalls with positive reinforcement is that sometimes it takes a little bit longer than scaring the bejesus out of a dog once or twice.
Right.
It takes a little bit of training, a little bit of effort. However, the dogs that I've seen come in and they already have skills, they're transferring these skills really, really quickly. I taught a class last week, and I had 2 or 3 of the dogs that were really fluent in an alert, or behavior that we were using as an alert. And those dogs were, we exposed them to the snake scent. We called the alert or cued it. And towards the end of a session, I think we did 2-minute training sessions. And by the end of the second training session, they were already choosing to come back and alert. So it's fast once they have that alert trained in there, or that behavior really well trained. It transfers over really quick.
So when one of the things, I'm not sure if you know this about me or not, but for a while I trained bed bug detection dogs, and that was a lot of fun and I enjoyed it, but we had to teach the dog an alert. And usually the alert that we used was when the dog smelled the bed bugs, it'd freeze and look back at us.
Yeah.
What kind of alerts are you using for snake avoidance? Is there like a vast array of potential alerts, or are you shooting for one particular thing?
I think it could be a vast array. It kind of depends on the dog and what they're coming to us with already. Because my goal is to get these people in and out as fast as possible, and make sure that everything's nice and fluent. So if a dog comes to me and they know how to hand target, we'll use that. So the dog goes into snake scent, snake cue, and will cue a hand target. And so I'm teaching people to just relax and keep their hands loose at their side, because oftentimes when we're asking a dog to hand target, we put our hand up and say, hey, touch this, or touch this with your nose. But when we're walking, our hands are nice and relaxed by our side. So if we cue a hand target, then the dogs need to come over and hit a relaxed hand. So that's one thing. Some dogs will bark on cue. A lot of people teach their dog that cute trick of speak. That's something that we definitely used a lot in search and rescue, and that requires the dog to be close to you in order to bark at you. Unless you were doing like disaster training where the dogs are barking at the victim. But wilderness search and rescue, the dog goes to the victim and then comes back to the handler. So I just teach the come back to the handler and bark. For some dogs, they don't have a hand target or a bark or anything like that, but they have a good shake. So we'll teach them to paw target a knee or something like that.
So you said that it can be clicker training. Like when you do your classes, is that the way you're doing it? Because I realize you could use other methods of marking, and fundamentally clicker training is marker training.
Yeah.
But are you teaching people to use a clicker while they're doing this?
If they come to me using a clicker, I might explain it to them if they're interested in it. But again, if they're more comfortable using a good or a yes, I'm going to use whatever faster for them and whatever the dog is already fluent in understanding. So if they understand that good or yes is always followed by a cookie or a toy, then we're going to use good or yes. If they're fluent with using the clicker, then we'll use the clicker. But again, walking around, watching the dog, having those treats, and the mechanics can be pretty tricky when you throw in something in another hand. So I will coach people through training and alert using a clicker, because it's easier to teach, very precise behaviors with a clicker. So I might initially teach the hand target or the paw touch to a knee with a clicker. And then once that behavior is fluent, we don't need the clicker anymore.
Okay. So you said something earlier about a dummy snake. So I'm assuming you're not using live snakes at all with this?
I am not. And so there are a couple of downfalls with that, right? Because if we're not using a live snake, it's not completely real. However, I just find that, we're doing snake avoidance training because it's dangerous to begin with, right? And exposing these dogs and handlers and myself to a snake that's dangerous is just beyond the level of risk that I'm willing to take. However, so making sure that the dogs are getting the cue of visual, scent, and auditory. I do use, fake snakes, and then I'll put a cell phone underneath it so it's playing the noise from the rattlesnake. And then I will also pair it with some snake skin. I used to use, cotton balls that had been in a snake cage. But honestly, if we're talking about scent theory and all that stuff, if the dogs are cueing off dead slough skin cells, as far as what they're picking up on scent, then I think that a snake shed will probably work just as well.
Okay. So now, do you have to do individual work to teach the dog to cue off of scent, to cue off of visual, and to cue off of sound, or do you mix them all together? Because out in the real world, you don't know what the dog is going to cue on. In fact, it might not cue at all if the wind is blowing the wrong way and the snake is buried and silent. The dog's liable to go right over top. But
yeah, and I think that's a big problem with both positive reinforcement
it is,
and the shock collar, is that if they don't know it's there, then they don't know it's there. They don't know how to avoid it.
Right. Yeah, and this is a conversation I've had with a lot of people who are looking for traditional snake proofing over the past couple of years, is because if you imagine out in the field, imagine the ground is a big round pie. There's only a slice of that pie where the dog is going to be in a position to catch scent of that snake. And anywhere else on that pie, if the dog's coming another direction, he's dependent on sight. And hunting dogs tend to move very quickly. So
Yes.
there's snake avoidance is only as good as the dog being able to sense the snake there. So I'm sorry, but so back to the question though, do you have to train each cue separately, or or if you put them all together, does that seem sufficient for the dog to cue off any particular
Yeah.
cue?
So what I do is I put them all together initially so that we've got them all there. I have no idea what the dog is actually cueing off of. It could just be auditory, it could just be sight, it could just be scent. And then I would take it and then generalize each individual cue. So I would probably put a silent fake snake out there, and just so that the dog is cueing off of the visual. And then I would put just a snake skin out there, or hide the snake so that they're just getting the scent with it silent, and then hide the sound, and then make sure that they're working off of that. So I would train it with all three together just to be most efficient, and then generalize it using those three separate cues.
Okay.
Makes
Um,
sense?
yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So I was going to ask you if your methodology was steadiness based. In other words, the dog sees the snake and freezes and holds there, or if it was more, uh, I don't know how to put it, leave it based. And it sounds like it's your methodology is more of a leave it based
Yeah,
approach.
I'd probably call it more of like a recall based approach.
Okay.
Because I mean, you have to leave it in order to come when called, right?
Right.
Uh, because I don't necessarily want the dog just to ignore it. I mean, it'd be fine if they just ignored the snake, but then if you step on it because the dog didn't tell you it was there, you're still up a creek without a paddle.
Right.
Uh, Especially when you're out hunting and you're out in the middle of nowhere and it's hard to get to medical care. So it's nice to know that they're there. So I would call it more of a recall based protocol.
Okay. That's good to know. One of the questions that um, we had in our positive gun dog training pro group, which is a pretty good question, I think, for bird hunters, because bird hunters tend to go to different states and hunt. There, some hunt in Colorado, but there's just better places in Texas and South Dakota. And there's some of these places have stuff other than our Colorado prairie rattlers. Um, so do you find that this training generalizes from one species of rattlesnake to another, or even from one species of venomous snake to another? Is there any transfer there?
I have no idea because I've only done it in Colorado. However, I suspect that it does. Mostly because of the aversion training that's done. They mostly use diamondbacks, and we have the prairie rattlers here.
Right.
So I would assume that it's transferring that way. It would probably transfer the other way. The other thing that I'm starting to play around with cues is actually a moving snake.
Mm.
Uh, because the snakes aren't always stationary, or they're not always coiled up in strike mode. They might be trying to escape as well, and we need the dogs to be able to leave that too, or recall away from that. So kind of playing around with some new stuff. We'll see how it goes. It'll be pretty cool, but yeah.
Okay. So I assume that your end goal is for people to be able to take this knowledge that you're giving them and go train their own dog, or does this need to be done in a class context? I guess what I'm really trying to figure out is if somebody wants to do this, how hard is it to acquire the snake scent and that sort of thing?
Yeah. So I don't. I think it depends on what people have available to them. I don't think that snake scent is very difficult to come by, especially if you're hunting in those areas and out there hiking. If you're finding snake skins, then you can certainly use those. And then finding model snakes, something like that. Um, but yeah, I think most of the training should probably be done on their own. And people come to the workshops to find out how to get there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
a lot of it is just general good training. Does your dog have a decent recall? Does your dog, enjoy being around you? Are they paying attention to you?
Mm-hmm.
Are they good at working? That sort of stuff. Some people come to the workshops and their dogs just haven't done anything yet. I had one woman come and I think she had gotten the dog the week before. So there wasn't a whole lot of relationship established, but we could get her started with training an alert and seeing what her dog would do when exposed to the snake sight, scent, and smell, or sight, scent, and sound. Which is always kind of interesting to me because some dogs are super interested in it and some dogs really try to avoid it anyway. So it's a natural avoidance response too. And I think it's just peace of mind that owners can see, if their dog's avoiding the decoy snake completely, then they have a little bit more assurance that when they go out, their dog's probably going to naturally avoid a snake too. Yeah, and speaking back to that generalization question too, I think I got a question about whether or not this would generalize to poisonous frogs a week or so ago. And I suspect that it would probably generalize as well. You just got to figure out how to get that scent of the frog, without poisoning yourself.
Sure. Do you have any resources out there or any resources in the making that can help get this sort of methodology out to people? I know that in our Positive Gun Dog Training Pro Group, we have people from Australia where there's lots of venomous snakes, South Africa where they don't even train their hunting dogs in the summer, according to one of our members, because there's so many venomous snakes out there. And for them to come to Colorado for a class is a bit on the prohibitive side. So what do you got going on as far as building up some resources for this sort of thing?
Yeah, so I've been asked that a lot lately, just because it is so widespread and there are not any, I think there's one other trainer that I've heard of doing this in the United States. So I've been looking into getting some webinars up and looking into getting some training online. So I'd love to hear if there's interest out there, and we'll get some resources together and we can do some online classes, online webinar, that sort of thing, see what the interest is at.
Okay. How can people who are in need of more information find you? What's the best way to contact you or for additional information?
Yeah, so you can reach me either through my website, which is www.tydt.dog, D-O-G, or you can feel free to email me at trustyourdogtraining@gmail.com.
Okay. I will put all that information down below in the show notes. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us what you're doing. And I'm going to put this out there to as many people as I can. And, hopefully it helps this whole movement to grow a little bit, because there are a few things that I found in the dog training industry where progress is extremely slow. One is in my niche, which is positive gun dog training, and snake avoidance is another one. So you're doing a good thing there.
Thanks. I learn something new every time I teach a workshop. Somebody comes in with some new question, and I'm sure you do the same, where somebody asks something and you're like, oh, maybe I should change that. Okay.
Yep. It happens all the time.
Yep. So it's constantly evolving.
Okay. Well, thanks again for joining us, Amy, and I will look forward to talking with you in the future.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
You got it.